Molly here. This episode was extremely convoluted and just trash, so I'm going to give it the recap it deserves, then the old man and I will discuss it. So here we go. Star Trek Strange New Worlds, Season 3, Episode 4, A Space Adventure Hour. The episode begins with a very nasty parody of Star Trek, the original series, called The Last Frontier. It had a lot of problems, but the most egregious part, in my opinion, was Paul Wesley's William Shatner impression, and James T. Kirk being written like an imbecile bimbo who's obsessed with his diction. What this is supposed to be is part of a holodeck story for La'an to test the new recreation room meant for people on ships doing long-haul deep space missions. The test will be run under load while everyone else is observing some collapsing neutron star. Long story short, the new holodeck draws a lot more power than anticipated, trapping La'an in the story with safety protocols off, while endangering the whole crew by diverting power from the shields, engines, life support, etc. In order for the simulation to end, La'an has to solve the mystery. The mystery itself is based on a book series La'an read after being rescued from the Gorn. Apparently, it got her through a very difficult time. Personally, I found this to be odd. Maybe some people react differently, but my experience has been that I want nothing to do with anything that reminds me of the very difficult task of putting my life back together after a trauma, let alone going back and fondly revisiting the books, music, etc. that were my escape during that time, but whatever. Anyway, the holodeck story itself is made up of the actors and creatives behind the parody of TOS, The Last Frontier. The head of the studio producing the parody show is dead in a bathtub, and La'an has to solve the mystery of who killed him. The details of the story really aren't important, especially since the killer turns out to be a hologram of Spock, because the computer deduced that La'an would never suspect Spock. Of course, La'an could tell that the hologram wasn't the real Spock, and I use the term real loosely, because he didn't look at her the way the real Spock does, and she tells real Spock this at the end of the episode, and they kiss. What is important in this story is the portrayal of the people involved in The Last Frontier. I already mentioned the terrible Shatner impression and Captain Kirk's diction. The portrayal of Gene Roddenberry makes him look like a slimy coward. Una is portraying Lucille Ball, which actually wasn't bad. Ortegas was allegedly DeForest Kelley. I gathered that from the "I'm not a doctor" line. Plus, she was called Lee Woods, which is obviously a play on DeForest and Kelly. I had to look online to find more definitive information on Nurse Chapel's character, and the speculation is that she was supposed to be Leonard Nimoy. I guess she was the science officer, so sure, why not? The story had a nonsense ending with hologram Spock as the killer, but the message behind it was ugly. At one point, Uhura's character gave a little speech about how a piece of art or music or story can heal people, and how the show could inspire kids to search the stars and give people insight into themselves and give them hope. The original intent was to give audiences a digestible reflection of their own world through the lens of fantasy, social commentary with rubber masks and buried metaphors. You know, science fiction. But the studio was more cautious, didn't want to make waves, and they were cowards. The creator wanted to take their rotten world with its warts and injustices and give audiences something better. She goes on to say that the show could have gone on forever, given generations of fans a place to feel seen, to belong, something to believe in again, no matter who they were or where they came from. But you can't do any of that without a season 2. So anyway, La'an solves the mystery, and she and Scotty recommend that the holodeck isn't ready for use, and when it is implemented, it needs a dedicated power source. Then Una tells Scotty to ask for help in the future when he should have gotten a serious dressing down for the endangering of the lives of the entire crew, and the excuse is he was traumatized by his CO not investigating some anomalies he saw on his previous posting, and then a whole bunch of people died. So now Scotty is yet another character with emotional problems due to past trauma. La'an and Spock kiss, and the closing credits are more of that Last Frontier show. The end. Well, I thought this was a giant pile of shite. I just get the feeling that, and I've thought this for a while, and probably a lot of other people feel this way, that Strange New Worlds, and probably all of this Kurtzman secret hideout trek, it all flows from the cage and not TOS. When I was looking into this a little bit further, I stumbled on an article that talked about Lucille Ball's contribution. And it was a story written about women in science. But anyway, the point is, it talks about how NBC rejected the first Star Trek pilot, The Cage, due to its perceived intellectual and sophisticated nature, which was not seen as suitable for audiences at the time. And that Lucille Ball overrode the Desilu board to get the second pilot made, putting up her own money to do so. And I just feel like all of this, like I said, I think it flows from The Cage. And they want to hold it up there as some sort of, I guess, original social justice TV show that they tried to make because it had things like a woman as the first officer, but then, you know, they were told, no, you can't do that because these audiences aren't going to accept that. And I feel like they think the TOS is the garbage version because it stripped out what they think is the original intent of, like I said, their social justice. That's what I think. That's what I think all of this is about. I think they have nothing but contempt for the original series. Honestly, the way that this little holodeck story went, it seems to me that they have contempt for Gene Roddenberry. I don't know what they were trying to get at exactly with the, well, you can't do that without a second season. Well, that original Cage pilot, that didn't even get a series. I don't even know what to say at this point. Because they seem to think that this is all homage, I guess. I don't know. Or they think that we'll believe it. It just seems like these people, all they do is piss on our leg and tell us it's raining. You know, I looked at the people who wrote this episode. Dana Horgan and Catherine Lynn. And directed by Jonathan Frakes. I mean, really? Really? That too? Seriously? Anyway, Dana Horgan, yeah, she's written for Strange New Worlds before, Season 2, Episode 2, Ad Astra Per Aspera, Season 2, Episode 9, Subspace Rhapsody, which was the musical episode, which I know we all loved. Yeah, she also wrote for Supergirl, Seasons 4 through 6. She did 14 episodes of that. And she wrote for Once Upon a Time, Seasons 4 through 7, 27 episodes. And then Catherine Lynn, she has written for Strange New Worlds before, Season 2, Episode 5, Charades, and Season 2, Episode 7, Those Old Scientists, which we know was the crossover with Lower Decks. And she wrote 10 episodes of Lower Decks. I just think all of that stuff has just been garbage. It's all garbage. And honestly, I did watch Once Upon a Time, but you know what? I didn't watch Seasons 4 through 7 because they were garbage. This was just mean. And people think this is good. When I was doing some research trying to figure out exactly who everybody was, because, well, obviously Gene Roddenberry, that was an easy one. Oh, the Shatner, oh. I knew who Lucille Ball was. But the rest, I was kind of like, well, what are they trying to get at here? Because, you know, they had the DeForest Kelley person writing a script for another Western, which, I don't know. I don't know if DeForest Kelley wrote or not, but I know DC Fontana wrote for Westerns. She even wrote for Bonanza. It just seems like all of this stuff is mean-spirited. And I can't believe so many people think this was good. They don't know when they're being made fun of.
What this episode reminded me of, especially with Alex Kurtzman being in charge of this new franchise, is we've talked many times about the 90s series, Hercules, The Legendary Journeys. And there was an episode in season 4, I think it was episode 15, called Yes, Virginia, There is a Hercules. And the premise behind that was that Kevin Sorbo, the main actor of the show, was gone. And the people associated with the production were scrambling to try to figure out where he was and how to recover if they couldn't find him to keep the production going. The episode itself, the executives that were scrambling, they were all played by actors who are in the actual series. The funny part is inside that episode, Alex Kurtzman and Roberta Orci were actually portrayed in that episode. Alex Kurtzman was played by Ted Raimi. And that's why I'm making the comparison here, because if one wants to be kind and say, well, what were they trying to do here? And by the way, I don't think this is the case, but let's just say, best case, what they were trying to do with this Strange New Worlds episode was to do a version of Yes, Virginia, There is a Hercules, where they're making fun of their own production, but it's a fun ribbing going on. And it wasn't offensive because there was no other production before Hercules, The Legendary Journeys. So all they were making fun of is themselves. And we assume, since they wrote this, they were okay with making fun of themselves. So that didn't come across as mean-spirited at all. In fact, I would recommend, if you see it online, watch it. It's kind of funny, especially if you've watched any part of Hercules, The Legendary Journeys. Some of the interesting actor-to-character flips that they do when they're playing their executives are kind of like the polar opposite of what they would be in the actual character when they were playing it in the series. So I think that's what they were best case trying to do here, except I'm not giving them credit anymore. Because I think this was a deliberate attack against William Shatner and Gene Roddenberry. I think this shows how much disdain this franchise currently has for the original source material. Because previously, this series, Strange New Worlds, I usually cut a little bit of slack saying, well, you know, they're trying to make decent Star Trek. They're trying not to be Discovery. They're not crapping on the fans directly. Because Discovery, that if you watch like our last season of reviews, we were putting in the bare basics because we could tell that Alex Kurtzman and his people hated Star Trek. And they were doing everything they could every episode to make fun of Star Trek. So we just did our due diligence to say, yep, we put an effort in for that episode, but we knew the episodes weren't going to be very good. Strange New Worlds, despite us not liking a lot of what they've done, even if you go back to our previous episode review, where we were pretty harsh on the episode, we still were like, well, here's what I think they could have done, or what they were trying to do if they just would have done this, or had 3 different story ideas. This episode, I can't give them credit for anything they were trying to do.
There was no fixing this episode. The only way to fix it is to toss it in the trash can.
The portrayal of the original series as some sort of Flash Gordon, Buck Rogers, part of me wanted to go and think about Captain Proton from Voyager, because that's like the same era of what they were thinking that Star Trek the original series was. They were thinking the original series was purposely just camp. Not camp because, well, that's just kind of the 60s and sometimes stuff came across that way. And some of the episodes of TOS did have a camp feel to it, but honestly not a lot of them, just some of them, in my opinion anyway. But they portrayed the original series like it was a joke. A joke. And then that speech that the actress who plays Uhura gave, I think she was playing the agent of 3 of the actors that were in this behind-the-scenes type holodeck thing. But that speech she gave if given with any conviction, is what Star Trek should be. It should be something that people who maybe don't have a home are able to find and connect with this wonderfully created universe where everybody's accepted and people can be whatever they want to be, and all the nice things that you could say that if you just look at the script of what she said for this episode, most of that you could nod and go, yeah, that's what Star Trek is. Until you listen to the intonation of her voice. It's clear that there's a tongue-in-cheek when she's saying this.
Yeah, and the other problem I had with that was that it was filled with buzzwords that are used by a certain group of people right now. Because think about that. Constantly talking about being seen. I can understand that people want to feel like they belong somewhere. But this whole being seen thing, I am really burned out on that. And I don't want to get nasty about it. But I just don't understand these people who want to be seen for their identity and not for themselves. Because that's what a lot of this comes down to.
If you want to be seen, do something with your life.
Yeah.
Accomplish something. You will be seen.
Yes.
And what they did to William Shatner, I know Shatner on Twitter has voiced his displeasure with how Star Trek's being run right now. But what they did to him, they should be embarrassed. And I'm going to say this, Jonathan Frakes should be embarrassed of himself for putting his name as director on this.
Ashamed. He should be ashamed.
Alumni of the Next Generation. When he did work on Picard or Discovery as director, I usually gave him the excuse of, well, he was trying to make the best out of a bad situation. And usually his episodes were better than what was around it when he wasn't directing. But this was a hatchet job on Star Trek, and shame on Jonathan Frakes for directing this episode. I don't care if somebody says, no, this was meant as good-spirited ribbing. You go back to that Hercules episode, that was good-spirited ribbing, but you were just making fun of yourself, so there was no apology needed.
Yeah, you weren't going after elderly people and the dead who can't defend themselves. Because that's the other thing. Like, the narrative that goes around about Gene Roddenberry after his death, I don't know what to believe, but I do know that talking stuff about people after they've passed and they can't defend themselves anymore, that's just disgusting. What's the point of that, other than to puff themselves up?
And they were making the Gene Roddenberry character in this holodeck episode, he was some drunk, just bad character. I mean, it was, then him and the Shatner character were like fighting with each other, arguing with each other. To what end? Like, why character assassinate the old Star Trek? I don't understand, other than they're tired of hearing from people like us who are trying to say, look, this is how the original series would do this, this, and this. And so what they're doing is they're just rewriting. They're saying, no, Captain Proton on Strange New Worlds, that's what Star Trek was. That's what it was, this silly thing. They had Ortegas flying the ship, which I don't quite get if she was supposed to be the McCoy character, but whatever. And she was pulling these stupid levers to fly the ship, and that was never, ever, ever on the original series.
Was she flying the ship, or was she shooting lasers at that creature or something?
There was never stupid levers.
And they were trying to steal their brain cells.
Yeah, there were never stupid levers that were being used to fire weapons.
That's right, people. The story had an alien that was trying to steal their brain cells. That's what the story inside the story was.
And sure, if I want to be kind, they had the Shatner side lighting on his face on Paul Wesley's character, and they had the shadow of that grating that you usually see in engineering, and a lot of TOS shots have that shadow on the wall, and they did that in here as well. There was some homage that I could have given credit for, but the character assassination of the franchise it dismisses that. I mean, I could give some credit, but I'm not going to because of everything else they did.
If you want to see proper homage, I say look at Star Trek Continues. Vic Mignogna did an excellent Captain Kirk. Way better than this.
And I guess speaking of that, because it follows with Star Trek Continues, let's go back to the animated series of Star Trek from the 70s. And there was that episode, The Practical Joker, where they had a recreational room, which was an early holodeck imagination, I guess we'll say. And then Star Trek Continues, I believe it was the first episode, they introduced the series with Scotty prototyping a holodeck on the Enterprise. I realize Star Trek Continues is not canon. I'm just pointing out that this was set at, it's basically the 4th season of TOS is what Star Trek Continues was. We're trying to round out seasons 4 and 5, I guess, to make it a 5-year mission. They called it in this episode, they eventually called it a holodeck, but I think it was Pike said it was the recreation room. And then I had to go back to that animated series episode because maybe I misremembered and it was called the recreation room. But no, the cat lady from TAS, the animated series, Maress, I think was her name, Maress called it the recreational room. And she pronounced it that way. So it wasn't the recreational room or recreation room. And then I think Una, after Pike said it was the recreation room, Una said, well, we'll just call it the holodeck because that's a better name anyway. And I saw that as spitting on the original series. I realized the animated series was, depending on who you ask, canon, not canon, partial canon. I think Roddenberry flip-flopped on how he considered the animated series. But at least in our head canon, it's in there. So dumping on the name recreational by just changing the pronunciation to recreation and then saying, well, that's not very good, let's call it the holodeck. I saw that as a spit in the face of TOS as well. I have nothing positive to say, and then I don't know if Discount Drummer was supposed to be Carmen Sandiego or if there's some other person she was dressed as, but when she was walking around with that hat on, all I thought was, where in the world is Carmen Sandiego?
Catherine Lynn wrote for that early 2020s Carmen Sandiego cartoon.
And maybe that's where it came from. Or if somebody in the comments knows what that's a reference to, let me know. Let us know. But that's what I thought of through the whole episode is, why is she dressed like Carmen Sandiego? And I guess it was supposed to be because that novel series, which even the premise of what her novel series was, reminded me of Picard and his Dixon Hill stuff. The film noir, private detective, that's essentially what Discount Drummer was in this episode. And then the love story at the end, or I guess I'm jumping ahead, the attraction between Spock and Discount Drummer right after the whole chapel thing, they do not like the Spock character, the people who make this show. And we already know this, but they're just piling on at this point. They now just established they do not like William Shatner and Captain Kirk. And now they've made it abundantly clear they're not too happy with Gene Roddenberry either. Which is funny because I think his son is associated with this production. So I think he's got some issues he needs to work through some therapy with. This was a disgusting episode. This was probably the worst episode, not only of Strange New Worlds, but all of New Trek that I've ever seen, based on the smear job they did on TOS. And if they tried to come across, or any of these people that drive by in the comments try to say, well, no, this was just playful. No, it wasn't playful anything. This was mean-spirited. I know what playful looks like. I just mentioned that Hercules episode. That's playful, making fun of yourself. Watch that episode. You probably will not feel any sort of mean-spirited to it because they were making fun of themselves. Alex Kurtzman was contributing with making fun of himself at that point.
It's worth it just to see that, to watch it.
But here, they weren't making fun of the people who wrote Discovery or the people who wrote Strange New Worlds. No, they were saying, no, we're going to make fun of the TOS era. Most of those people are gone now. We're going to make fun of them. Not homage, This wasn't a Galaxy Quest where still at the heart of Galaxy Quest was some good stuff. No, this was just making fun of Star Trek. Anybody who comes by and says, well, I watched Star Trek since the very beginning. I go all the way back. I went to school with Gene Roddenberry, or whatever unverifiable fact that they try to put on a comment to try to give themselves some sort of credence when it comes to their account they're going to give. But anybody who comes by and says, I watched this from the first run and I thought this was fine. It's fine to make fun of Star Trek like this. That's fine. Or to try to compare this to like a holodeck episode like the Deep Space Nine one where they had the baseball game and say that's the same thing when no way was that episode mean-spirited with what they were doing. They were making a little bit of fun. Like Worf was making some overly aggressive suggestions when it came to baseball strategy that you wouldn't want to do in real life because you don't want to be killing baseball players. Nobody took that seriously. It was a fun episode. It was a ribbing episode. It was a good fun. The TNG episodes, the Sherlock Holmes episodes, those were usually fun episodes. I mean, they didn't necessarily go meta on you, but they weren't mean-spirited. But this episode was 100% mean-spirited. There is no way I can see anybody watching this and not seeing this as completely spitting every single sentence on the original series. And like Molly said, she used a very good phrase that this is what reminded me of. The don't tell me it's raining while pissing down my leg. And what that means, if people haven't heard that phrase before, and I'm thinking the younger people, is if you feel something that feels like you're doing something bad, but you're being gaslit. No, I'm not doing anything bad to you. It's this other thing. You're overreacting. And that's what this is here. There is no different interpretation that I'm going to accept as anything but shilling if anybody tries to defend this episode, even as, well, they missed the mark, but they tried. No, they were not trying to do something not mean-spirited. There were too many instances in this episode. It's not like I picked one line here and said, yeah, that one phrase kind of bent me the wrong way. It was 47 minutes of just offending me left and right. This was a horrible episode. Anybody who claims in any way to like the original series, if you like this episode, power to you, but I do not understand at all why you like this episode.
And I didn't verbatim read off a lot of the horrible things that happened in this episode. Like when their Captain Kirk stand-in was saying sexist things, and when Gene Roddenberry, their version of him, was insulting the Kirk actor's ability to act. I mean, there was some really nasty, pointy stuff in this. Honestly, you have to watch it to really get the full effect of what happened here. But I don't recommend watching this because it was a convoluted mess that did nothing but insult TOS.
Nonstop.
Yeah.
There's a part of me that says you actually should watch this episode. Because a lot of times when a person gives a review, the viewer of the review will be like, well, okay, I mean, I think they're using some hyperbole, or you should watch this, I think, to really, if you are a fan of TOS, you should probably watch this so that there's no
illusion.
Yeah, that we're misrepresenting the smear job that was done on TOS in this episode.
Yeah. And afterward, you know what? If you do watch it, let us know if you think that what this actually indicates is that, yeah, I was right. All of this new Trek flows from the cage. It does not flow from the original series.
Yeah, because I think, as I'm interpreting what you're thinking, because I didn't catch that when you were first explaining this to me, but then going back, and I was sitting with you when you were taking notes for the recap, and I'm nodding, going, yep, is I think the theory here is that the cage, with what they would call back then their progressive way of making that, including women in long pants and Majel Barrett being number one, that should have been the way things went, but this bastardization happened with William Shatner coming in and the women putting skirts, which I've talked to women who lived in that era because at first I didn't understand the mini skirts and why that would not be a male gaze only thing. And I had a lady explain to me that you had to live back then to realize wearing mini skirts and the sexual revolution that happened around that time, that was empowering for women to choose to wear stuff like that, to actually show skin. And I didn't think of it that way because I'm not a female and I'm not a female of that era. But when explained to me, it's like, okay, so that's why they were pushing the mini skirts. It's not that it made sense in narrative for these women to be wearing skirts on a starship. It was more of the time it was made and what it was trying to message as far as women and women liberation. So,
they weren't being forced to cover their ankles.
So that's what that was about. Now, that's not to say that there weren't other reasons too, because putting women in skirts usually gets ratings, at least it did back then. But that's not the reason. That the woman that I did talk with of that era, she explained to me why she saw that as empowering. And that's what I think when Molly mentioned her take on this, I'm like, you're right. It's like somehow in their minds they think TOS after the cage bastardized Star Trek. And so let's be honest, every part of all these iterations that are in our history now of Star Trek, they all go back to TOS, not really the cage. The cage wasn't even aired. That wasn't even released. Again, somebody correct me here, but I thought it was like a 1980s found footage type thing that was released on like VHS, and in the 90s it came on extras on some DVD or something. So it wasn't even really a thing except with the menagerie in the actual series where they had snippets of it. But as a standalone thing, the cage, I don't even think that was a thing till the 80s, and I think it was like a VHS release. So it's like a fallacy that they're trying to state that Star Trek really began. All you TOS people that think you understand Star Trek, that's not Star Trek at all. That was a bastardization of Star Trek. Star Trek's actually the cage.
And I think that's what this timeline is. All of this new Trek under Alex Kurtzman. I think that this is all the cage timeline as opposed to the original series timeline.
This is in their minds how it should have went down from the get-go.
Yeah.
They're basically erasing TOS. Trying to, anyway.
Because it was clear in their little parody how much anger and resentment there is that they didn't go with the original concept laid out in the cage. That the studio executives meddled, and TOS is what we got.
Which is odd, too, because they did a pretty reasonable job lifting up Lucille Ball in her characterization here. But in narrative, or even outside of narrative, the fact that she was pushing for that second pilot to keep the thing going even after the executive said no, like, it doesn't even really line up with their...
Well, they killed her in that parody.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just sum this up by saying I found this to be offensive. These people, they hate TOS, I think, because they didn't get to have their number one who was a woman. And that apparently the Captain Kirk character was obsessed with his diction. This was terrible. This was terrible.
It reminded me, we talked about that episode that had the rec room in the animated series. When we were rewatching that to make sure I had the pronunciation of recreation room down correctly, earlier in that episode, the plot of the episode was that the Enterprise went through this energy cloud, and when it came out of there, it infected the ship's computer, and the ship's computer was playing practical jokes on everybody. And there was this one piece of dialogue where Kirk came on the bridge and he was complaining about who did this, because he went to get his new uniform and put it on, and then he turns around, and on the back of his shirt, it says, "Kirk is a jerk." And that's essentially what this episode was. They should have put that screenshot. In fact, I would argue maybe that should be our thumbnail, is just put "Kirk is a jerk" on the back, because that explains what this episode was about. That Kirk was a jerk.
Yeah, this was bad. Insulting. That's just the best way to sum this up. It was insulting. So that's all I have to say about that.
And I figure let's briefly just talk about Starfleet Academy. They released that trailer, and we were tempted to release our own take on that. But so many other channels were covering that, and it didn't really seem to... Like, our opinion on that, I don't think would have been much different than what most channels were complaining about.
Oh, no. I mean, everybody else pretty much had it covered, so I didn't need to retread territory they already went over.
All I can say, and I've been saying this for a few videos now, because I think this is Kurtzman and Paramount's attempt that they think they have the Gen Z audience figured out the combination of what these people want to watch, that generation. All I can say is you're taking a big gamble here, because Starfleet Academy appeals to nobody but maybe Gen Z. You're alienating Gen X, boomers, and most millennials.
They don't care.
Well, I know they don't care. They're making the attempt, saying, look, we got to cater to this young audience because we got to get a new generation of fans. Which I agree with, by the way. You do need to get the younger people on board, but I don't think making ridiculously stupid things like this is the way to do it. Harry Potter in space is not the way to grab these kids. In fact, Harry Potter is a millennial property that's not even a Gen Z property as far as the audience goes. So they're even missing the mark on that.
Yes, and just to be clear, and I know this will probably piss off some people, but I only recognize the first 2 Harry Potter films. All the films that came after that were garbage.
I know you enjoyed the entire book
books.
series.
I read the books.
But
the books were great.
The films after the second film...
That third film on was garbage. All of it. So, if you're going to make films 3 through the end and say that that's Starfleet Academy, it's just going to be trash.
And then the concept, because there was some article that came out afterwards, where the storylines are going to be partially in San Francisco, and then they get on this starship that's part of Starfleet Academy, like physically part of Starfleet Academy, and then it lifts off the ground, and then they go on missions. That just sounds stupid. Just the premise sounds stupid.
So is Miss Frizzle going to be driving the magic school bus?
That's exactly what this seems like it's going to be, which is probably aimed at that same type of age group is all I can think of. Not the age group now. I mean, back then what the magic school bus was shooting for.
Well, there was a new magic school bus not too long ago with Miss Frizzle's daughter as the teacher. I never watched that, so I don't know what that was like. But that's all I could think of when they've got this ship that lands on the ground and apparently it goes off to go on these adventures. It's the magic school bus.
I saw nothing in this trailer. It was all stupidity. All it was Easter eggs. The Cisco, where is the emissary now? Or that wall of all those names. Easter egg names. Yeah. And then you look at the characters they're giving you, and it's not that they're young. You would expect them to be young. These are cadets coming into Starfleet. But they just look like Gen Z television stereotypes, to put it nicely. They're swinging for the fences here, basically flipping off any of the other generations and saying, we're putting all of our lot into Gen Z. And I'm not sure they got Gen Z figured out, but I guess we'll find out. Also, just an FYI, I don't think the Gen Z generation is large enough to keep your franchise afloat because it's not one of the larger generations. The millennials were the ones you wanted to target if you wanted to get a large generation on your captured for your show. So even if you figured out Gen Z, it's not a gigantic generation. So good luck. And I don't think you got Gen Z, but we'll find out. I'm not a TV executive, so we'll find out if they captured Gen Z or not. But I do know they're alienating the other generations. You've committed to trying to see if this works, sink or swim. Good luck.
Well, it just goes to show they have zero respect for the source material. And honestly, I don't want to see a female Jem'Hadar that's half Klingon.
Well, how many half Klingons were on this new thing?
Apparently a lot.
It's like everybody apparently had business with the Klingons. This just seems so ill-conceived. And I just don't see how this is going to work because the timing of this. So this came out, this trailer for Starfleet Academy, came out during San Diego Comic-Con. And then the very next Strange New Worlds episode took a gigantic crap on TOS. I cannot think those two things are coincidental, that within the course of 1 week, they made it very clear we're shooting for Gen Z only. Get out of here, old people. And I'm going to crap all over TOS just in case you thought, old people, that this was still for you. That's the message I got after this week of that trailer and this episode, is they are making it very clear. Old people, do not watch. You are not welcomed here at all. Like, at all. Just get out of here. This is not for you, boomers. Just get out of here. I think they need to have Gen Z brought into the fold, but you don't crap on your older viewers to do that. TNG did not crap on TOS people, at least not directly. It's stupid. I don't know how this works. I honestly do not know how this is going to work. This strategy of crapping on the older generations to get them to leave once and for all, because somehow the Gen Zs and I guess the Alphas are going to pick this show up and run with it.
I highly doubt it.
I don't think they have it figured out at all, but I think that's what they're trying to do.
Well, here's the thing. You should never crap on somebody else's work to try to elevate your own. Because it doesn't work. It just makes you look bad. Number 2, kids generally want something that's theirs. So even though allegedly they're making this for Gen Z, it's still got Star Trek written on it. Even though it doesn't resemble...
Well, you could make the argument that TOS was meant for boomers and older, and TNG and Deep Space Nine were made for Gen X. So that formula could still work, but when you look at TNG, they had, for the 80s, they had hairstyles and makeup that matched the 80s.
Well, and also remember, I don't know how many people actually liked Wesley Crusher.
I don't think anybody did that I knew of anyway.
And he was supposed to be the Gen Xer that connected with kids, but I don't think kids connected with him.
No, I mean...
I didn't like him.
It was usually...
I thought it was weenie.
It was like Data or Worf for the people that I knew that people connected to, and then Picard. After Wesley, like, Troy was the second least favorite, at least in the circle that I was around, as far as being just an annoying character. Good point. It wasn't the kid star that the Gen Xers gravitated toward. It was the adults.
Honestly, most of the people that I know, it was Captain Picard. And then after that was Data.
So good luck with this. I guess they're hoping that you're going to gravitate toward those teachers at Hogwarts, I mean Starfleet Academy.
Well, they don't look any good either.
No, I mean, I don't think they're going to be any good characters either. The Chancellor of Starfleet Academy, Holly Hunter, she's this mousy little thing, at least in the trailer. Maybe she's going to be better in the series, but she's this mousy little thing that doesn't inspire any confidence in me of that being a leader.
No, it looks really bad. Really bad.
This was a week where I had to put up with Star Trek repeatedly being crapped on. First with the San Diego trailer, and then with this episode of Strange New Worlds. I don't have anything positive to tell the audience this week. Usually I come up with something. This was a dark week for Star Trek this week.
Yep, it sure was. I don't know what they've got in store for us next week, but my God, I don't see how it could get any worse than this.
You say that, and then we'll see.
Yeah, I think they see it as a challenge. Anyway, is there anything else you have to say about this, old man?
Let us know what you thought of this episode, because we feel dirty even talking about this episode as far as the plot points because of what they did to TOS. So we probably didn't get in as good of a critique as we could have on story elements. feel free in the comments if you want to discuss the actual story of this episode. Poor Molly, she was trying to take notes for this, and she's like, I don't want to do this. It's just, this is horrible. And Molly, to give her credit, she sat through it the second time through and took her notes, but she was not happy.
Well, there was no point, because this actually meant nothing. All that was actually established in this episode was that Scotty is some sort of trauma survivor who can't ask for help now because he has to do everything himself, and he ends up endangering the crew because of it. And now Spock and La'an apparently are in some sort of romantic relationship.
So are they going to have, later in the season, Chapel and Discount Drummer fighting over Spock?
Probably.
Or maybe Chapel will try to break up Spock and Discount Drummer again, because she likes breaking up couples that are supposed to be like none of her business.
Yeah, I don't...
The fact that I'm even talking about Spock's love life tells you how bad off this series is.
Well, I saw somebody in the comments under one of the articles that I read that was saying about Spock having a love life, that because the Pon farr can be fatal, that apparently it's necessary that he finds somebody. And it's kind of like, what? I mean, is the Pon farr even a thing in New Trek?
In New Trek, I don't think it's been mentioned, but again, somebody in the comments correct me if that's wrong.
So anyway, that was the weirdest one that I saw as far as comments.
People just make excuses up for this stuff instead of just admitting, look, this is just bad Star Trek. It's bad television. Just admit that. You don't have to make excuses. I know, oh my gosh, we might go through the wilderness years. Well, that's going to happen anyway. At least have some pride. Lift your head up. Take a stand.
Aren't we going to be getting a puppet show version of Strange New Worlds this season?
But yeah, we had that stupid season 4 trailer.
Oh, God.
Well, mini trailer, teaser trailer, where they're going to have an episode of puppets.
Wait a minute, they are going to do that. Oh, God. And you know what? Actually, that brings me up to something that I've been saying for a while, and I mentioned it in the previous video that we did, that it seems like because there's a truncated season of only 10 episodes, that previously when you used to get 26 episodes a season, that having the novelty episodes sprinkled throughout the larger season was no big deal. But now, all we get is novelty episodes. Because think about this season. Obviously the first episode was that Gorn thing. Apparently, for some reason, xenomorph is now a thing that you have to do. And then that second episode was...
stupid. That was a novelty episode.
We'll say it was a Q episode, for lack of any better way to describe it. That seems to be what they were trying to imply with Trelane. And then episode 3 was zombies. And now here we are with episode 4. With this...
hit job on TOS.
Yeah.
A holodeck episode when you shouldn't have holodecks yet.
Yep, exactly. So every single episode is basically a novelty episode. I mean, one could argue about that first episode, but I mean, that was really a continuation of the previous season. And again, if the Gorn are xenomorphs now instead of like proper Gorn, like I don't even know what to say about that. I'm just going to call it a novelty episode. But this season, yeah, it seems to be. It's nothing but novelty episodes. And then, to find out that allegedly there's going to be a puppet episode coming, there's another novelty episode. When are we going to get the actual serious episodes? And I use that term serious loosely because their serious episodes are also crap. Like, for instance, in this particular episode we just watched, it didn't move Captain Batel's story forward at all. With her having that Gorn infection. Or whatever you want to call it.
Or Ortegas and whatever is going on with her.
Oh, well, apparently she's just fine because Una put her back on the bridge.
Yeah, there was even a quick conversation about it. She's okay now. Oh, yeah, she's fine.
Fine.
I gave her a talking to. She's fine.
So, again, this season is a mess. The writing is a mess. Yeah, if you had a 26-episode season, you could get away with the novelty episodes being sprinkled here and there. But if you get 10 episodes and at least half of them are novelty episodes, then it's just an anthology parody of what it's supposed to be.
My take on those playful episodes that previous series have done, that's after they established goodwill. Because Encounter at Farpoint, it was a Q episode, but it was establishing the universe as well, the characters as well. So you establish that you can do your franchise correctly, or this is what it's going to be. You can deviate from that once in a while. Deep Space Nine, nobody would say, was about fun holodeck episodes with Vulcans playing Klingons in baseball teams. That was just a one-off ha ha ha. What is Strange New Worlds? What is its proper... if you were explaining to somebody what Strange New Worlds was about, what would you explain to them?
Well, like I just said,
Stupid Star Trek?
I would explain that this is an anthology show of each episode being a parody of Star Trek. But insulting.
Yeah.
Insulting to the viewer, insulting to the source material, insulting to the creators and the actors of the original series.
Well, that's the thing. There is a YouTube clip out there of Seth MacFarlane. I don't remember what talk show it was, but he was doing an impression of William Shatner's Captain Kirk. But you could tell he was doing that lovingly. And Paul Wesley, what he was doing here was not lovingly done. It wasn't. I don't care in whatever behind the scenes might say, oh, and I respect the character so much. I don't care what he says he was doing. On screen, this was a very mean-spirited thing he was doing. Whereas Seth MacFarlane, when he was doing his impression, you could tell he loved Star Trek. That was his way of showing reverence for Star Trek. And yeah, you know, Captain Kirk having a little bit of a... Shatner's portrayal having a little bit of a predictable speech pattern sometimes. That was just something that we just all accept as Star Trek fans as like, that's just, you know, Uncle Bill. Just Uncle Bill, that's just how he is. We don't make fun of him. That's just how Uncle Bill is.
We all have our own speech patterns. We do. And I'm just going to say this. When Jim Carrey did his impression, that was actually way more...
Ace Ventura.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this was... It was clear that was done as homage. This was not. This was mean-spirited.
Which is funny, because I call Paul Wesley's Kirk, I call him Ace Ventura, because I think he looks like Ace Ventura. But Ace Ventura, the movie itself, had a more respectful impression of the TOS franchise than what this series did, Strange New Worlds.
And I will say that I'm very disappointed in Anson Mount. He's supposed to be a Star Trek fan, and his portrayal of Gene Roddenberry was disgusting.
Yeah. Well, it's the same with Jonathan Frakes.
Yeah.
That's Riker. Yeah. Well, you just actively participated in an assassination attempt at TOS. No, I mean, I'm done with Jonathan Frakes. Done with him. I used to just say, look, the guy just wants a job. He's doing Discovery and he's doing Picard, but you know what? Those episodes were slightly better than the other ones, so he was actually elevating the material. Now, you read over the script, you say, I'm not doing this, and you walk away. If you had any respect for Star Trek The Legacy. And yeah, Anson Mount, the same thing. Look, guys, I'm not doing this. You don't need me in this episode because it's a holodecky episode. I don't need to be in this. I'm not doing it. He did it. He crapped all over Gene Roddenberry. So you guys decide what you think of Jonathan Frakes and Anson Mount now, but as far as I'm concerned, I'm done with those two.
They go on the same list with Alex Kurtzman. That's just how it has to be now. Because, shame on them for what they did. And, fool me once. You can't get fooled again.
Well, there are people out there that'll just keep eating this crap up over and over again. They can be fooled over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So, I don't think we have much more to say except not only do I not recommend this as far as quality goes, but I do recommend if you're a TOS fan and you really want to see Well, what is this hatred that sometimes Molly and the old man say that Kurtzman and his people have for Star Trek, old Star Trek? Yeah, watch this episode. It's not good, but you'll walk away knowing, yeah, Molly and the old man were right. They really do hate old Star Trek. And that's, I guess, my recommendation. Decide how you want to watch this. It's a bad episode, but if you really want to know how badly they hate Star Trek, watch this episode.
Yep, I would agree with that. Well, that's all I have to say about that crap. Until next week.
Take care.